Hello Internet, my name's Ben, and today I'd like to talk to you about the bank bailouts in Cyprus. So you may have heard there's something going on with the bank bailouts in Cyprus, and it's possible that you haven't been paying attention or that you don't care because there's been a lot of bank bailouts that have happened in the past and you don't care about Cyprus. Do you? I don't know, either way. But you should pay attention to this one because of reasons, which I will tell you at the end because that's apparently how these videos work. Okay, so instead of a bunch of side notes, I'm just going to do one big side note about government bailouts because I feel like a lot of people don't really know how they work. So if a business is facing financial trouble and the government of the country it's in doesn't want it to go bankrupt, like for instance if it's a really big bank and it's shutting its doors could really hurt the economy, or if it's GM, the government can step in and give that business an infusion of cash so it can restructure and get back on its feet. But the thing about it that I feel like a lot of people don't get is that money isn't gone, it's invested in that company. And the government sells off part of those investments over time. Or the bailouts can be structured like a loan and they get paid back over time with interest. So like in the TARP bailouts of 2008, we spent a ton of taxpayer money. But as of January of this year, we've gotten more than 97% of that money back, and the money is still coming in. So bailouts, when they work, are generally win-win. The business gets to keep being a business, and the government gets its money back with interest. It is, of course, much more complicated than that in real life, but I don't want to talk about that today, so we're going back to Cyprus. So the banks in Cyprus need bailing out, and the whole thing looks like it's going to cost about 16 billion euro. Which, is a lot of money, but not like a lot of money in terms of global banking. Like the TARP bailouts in 2008 ended up costing more than $400 billion. But there are two big problems with this bailout. Number one, Germans don't want to pay to bail out Cyprus's crummy banks. For the EU part of the bailout to go through, it needs to go through the German legislature, and there's some serious resistance to fully funding the bailout. See, banking laws in Cyprus are, let's call them, permissive. It's kind of like the Cayman Islands. If you have a lot of shady money and you want to hide it, you put it in a bank in the Cayman Islands. But if you have a lot of shady money and you want to hide it, and you're Russian, then you put it in a bank in Cyprus. And so there's a ton of Russian money in Cypriot... Hold on. Cypriot. Would not have called that. Okay. So there's a ton of Russian money in Cypriot banks. Like upwards of 40% of the money in banks in Cyprus is foreign money. And the German voters don't want the EU to spend 16 billion euros to protect the investments of Russian criminals. So they worked out a deal where the EU and the IMF would loan Cyprus 10 billion euros if Cyprus could come up with 6 billion euros of its own to put towards the bailout. This leads right into problem number two, which is that Cyprus doesn't have 6 billion euros to put towards the bailout. Cyprus has the smallest economy in Europe, and they've had a lot of financial difficulty recently because they were really overinvested in Greece. That, as you may have guessed, turned out to be a not so good investment on their part. But what Cyprus does have is bank money. Sweet, sweet bank money. Like upwards of 70 billion euros is deposited in Cypriot banks. So the plan is to take some of the depositors' money to help pay for the bailout. This is the troubling bit, and also the reason why this has been in the news. See, people have come to expect that the money they deposit in banks is safe. And the bank bailouts in the past have always affected the bank's investors, but not its depositors. But the government of Cyprus is making the argument that the bank's depositors are just as invested in the bank's financial success as its bondholders are. After all, they put their money in the bank and expect a return on their investment based on the bank's continued financial success. And because of this, the government of Cyprus is saying that they need to chip in to help save these banks. So there are a couple of proposals for this that have been talked about so far. The first plan involved everyone with more than 100,000 euro in the bank to lose about 10% of their total deposits. Everybody with less than that would lose about 7%. The Cypriot parliament voted on this measure on Tuesday and it received exactly 0 votes, with 36 against and 19 abstaining. So they're talking about some new proposals now. One of the more popular ones involves an exemption for everybody with less than 20,000 euro in the bank, but this would increase the amount that the wealthy depositors would have to pay to up to 15%. This plan has really pissed off the Russians because a lot of their wealthiest citizens would stand to lose a lot of money. So in response to this, the Russian government is threatening to change the terms of a 2.5 billion euro loan they made to Cyprus in 2011 if this proposal gets passed. So yeah, the process right now is still ongoing and we don't really know for sure what's going to happen next. But here's what we do know for sure. If Cyprus doesn't come up with the money, their banks will fail in the next couple of weeks. And Cyprus is a tiny country and they don't have a lot of options for how they're going to raise that money. And here's the thing, at some point, banks will need to be bailed out again, whether in Cyprus or in another country. And if Cyprus uses depositor money to bail out its banks, that could be a tough genie to put back in the bottle. So I guess we'll see what happens next. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more of these videos, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you have any ideas for what I should explain next, I'm open to suggestions. Peace.